the South London Waste Partnership. I am the current chair, Councillor Sacha Ryans, and we will just start with a round of introductions. There's no scheduled fire alarms to go off today, so if any alarm, please make your way out of the building. And this meeting is being recorded. So I'll start.
Hi, I'm Councillor Billy Christie, Cabinet Member for Finance here at MAT.
I'm Councillor Christopher Warmer, and Vice Chair of the Environment and Sustainable Transport Committee in Sutton.
I'm Councillor Barry Lewis from Sutton and Chair of the Environment and Sustainable Transport Committee.
Simon Boswell, Head of Contracts for the South London Waste Partnership.
Andrea Keys, Director for the South London Waste Partnership.
John Haynes, Communications Advisor for the Partnership.
Amy Dimitrovsky, Democracy Services Manager for Merton.
Councillor Noel Hedger-Michael from Kingston upon Thames, and portfolio holder for other things plus waste and recycling.
Councillor Scott Rush, Cabinet Member for Streets and Environment Equipment.
I'm John Bolsley, I'm the Assistant Director of Public Space for Barton Council.
Charles Baker, I'm Head of Environment and Neighbourhood Operations in Croydon.
Councillor Robert Ward, I'm Deputy Cabinet Member for Contract Management in Croydon.
And I'm Adrian May, the Interim Head of Democratic Services in Croydon.
Great, thank you very much. So as this is my last time in the chair, I will now ask for a proposed chair the next cycle of meetings.
I'd like to nominate Councillor Scott Rush from Croydon as Chair of the South Joint Waste Committee.
Do we have a seconder?
Happy to second.
And we also need a vice chair. Do you have a proposal?
I nominate Noel Hedger-Michael.
And second.
Second.
Great, and then I will now hand over to Councillor Rush.
Thank you very much. First of all, I'd like to start by thanking Merton Democratic Services for hosting the committee over the last year, and also to Councillor Natasha Irons for as the outgoing chair of the committee over the last 12 months. And I look forward to working with all of you over the next 12 months in Croydon. So we should go through the agenda items. So is it item number 2 we're starting on? Apologies. Yeah. So has the committee received any apologies for absence?
Do we have apologies from Councillor Reid?
Yes, from Kingston upon Thames.
Okay. So I confirm that we have representatives from each of the boroughs. As such, the meeting is follows. Item 3, declaration of interest. So does any committee members have any declaration of interest they need to announce? Okay. Item 4, minutes of the previous meeting. May I ask members of the committee if they can confirm you agree with the minutes that they are true and accurate reflection of the meeting held on the 25th of April 2023? Agreed. I'm guessing I'll sign them at the Okay. Item 5, contract performance report. So for this item, I'd like to invite Partnership Director Andrea Keys to present the contract performance report, in which the committee is invited to know the contents of this report. Andrea?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, so this is the contract performance report for the South London Waste Partnership. It provides the committee with an update on the performance of the transfer, treatment, recycling and disposal services that are procured and managed by the South London Waste Partnership on behalf of the 4 London boroughs. The services covered are food and green waste, household reuse and recycling centre services, and individual waste treatment services. The report covers the full year performance data for the period 1st of April 2022 until the 31st of March 2023. I'm going to start with some background because we have some new members. So we have food and green waste contracts. We have 4. The first is with BioCollectors Limited, and they receive and treat food waste. BioCollectors are an AD operator in the London Borough of Merton, and we have an agreement to take up to 5,000 tonnes of material to them per annum. Olico is the collection and treatment of food waste from the Kingston Villiers Road transfer station. Country Style is the collection and treatment of green waste, also from the Villiers Road transfer station. And then finally, we have the Suez Recovery and Recycling UK, Suez, receipts, bulking, transport, and treatment of green and is Croydon, Sutton and Merton who deliver into that contract. If we move to 2.5 of the report, we can start to talk about performance of the food and green waste contract. So you can see actually that the food and green waste tonnes have continued to decrease over the reporting period, the full period, 1st of April to the 31st of March 23. I talked a little bit about this in the previous committee, so I'm just updating you now with the end of year. So during the period, there was a 16% reduction in the total green waste, and that's collected at curbside and the HRC, and then we saw a 9% drop in food waste when compared to the same period of the previous year. As we've talked about in the last committee meeting, we are used to seeing seasonal variations of plus or minus 9%. So this is quite an exceptional reduction, and noting back to last summer, it was an exceptionally dry summer. So it was anticipated that our green waste tonnes would be low. We are as well expecting warmer weather going forward. So we'll keep monitoring the green waste tonnes and how they impact on the recycling rates. A note, even though the reduction in volume will impact recycling rates, it is the trend, the downward trend does support the waste hierarchy, which prioritises reduction over recycling. Is that okay? Thank you. Sorry. At 2.6, we've just provided you with a table that summarises those tonnages. Performance detail at part 3 of the report covers the household reuse and recycling centres. At 3.1, we've given you an overview of the service and what it covers. 3.3, we cover site user experience. You're probably all aware now we undertake customer satisfaction surveys at the site on a regular basis. We do 2 weeks in turn for each round. And I'm pleased to report the contract continues to achieve a high customer satisfaction rate. And we provide a summary of all of those survey results on the SLWP website. Moving over to 3.4, recycling performance. At the end of the reporting year, April 22 to March 23, the combined recycling performance at the SLWP HRC sites was 64%. In terms of that further analysis on that recycling, it's really interesting to note that our waste volumes are generally going down. So I've included again that table at 3.5 that you would have seen at the last committee meeting, just updated that with the full year's tonnages. Really interesting to see how which materials have gone down, and there are some that have increased, but by a very, very small percentage and very small tonnage. So I thought that was interesting to note at 3.5. Moving across to 3.10, we talk a little bit about reuse and recycling projects. Soil separation, recycling, we talk about that in each of the committee meetings, and we have a total of 1,771 tonnes have been diverted and separated since we started that scheme. Then we've got the reuse shops. We have a reuse shop at the Kimpton Parkway site in Sutton and the Fishers Farm site as well. And then in terms of social value, we continue to work on the toy giveaway. We continue to work with charities in order to donate games and books. We've also recently started conversations with Bike Hut, which is a scheme being delivered at Pollard's Hill in the centre there, and that will help. That's a social enterprise that's helping people to get access to cheap transport and bicycles. The rubble charging is 3.17. So just an update on the rubble charging. That has achieved a significant reduction in rubble tonnages, and they fell by 78.2% in the reporting year. And then we talk a little bit about the fair use policies at both Sutton and Kingston at 3.18 and 3.19. Moving on now to part 4 of the report, we talk about our residual waste treatment contract that's held with Viridor South London. Viridor South London has been delivering the services under this contract since the 4th of March 2019. In the reporting period, you'll see 4.2. In the reporting period, the boroughs delivered 195,239 tonnes, which is a 6% drop on the same period last year. And to note, this is the lowest annual tonnage generated by the boroughs since 2010, when we first started reporting to the joint committee. You can also see how that data looks in Appendix A, Table 3A. There is a diagram there that shows both the residual waste as the blue bar, the recycling as the yellow, the green as the green bar, and the food is the orange. And you can see how our total tonnes have dropped over the past since 2014-15. So a really positive news story there on waste reduction. 4.3, we talk about landfill diversion, and in the reporting period, we've diverted 100% of our residual waste away from landfill. Moving on to emissions, part 4.8 of the report, you'll see the table that summarises all of the exceedances in the reporting period, and that is, as I said, from April 22 until the 31st of March 23. Then finally, at 4.12, we've summarised the environmental permit variation that Viridor submitted that was looking to increase the capacity at the ERF. We are still waiting for an update on the status of that application. So there's no update on that as yet, but we will obviously come back to you as soon as we hear back from the EN. So the recommendation is to note the contents of the report and to comment on any aspects of the performance.
Thank you, Andrew. Can I just come back on the 4.2? Yes. So you said we've gone under 200,000 tonnes of obviously a good milestone. Are we going to advertise that or do a press release on the website to showcase what we achieved?
I think that's a really good suggestion, and we can do that. Yeah, yes. Absolutely. Yeah, I think it's an incredible achievement, and yeah, absolutely worthy of perhaps a commentary. So we'll perhaps draft something for you to review.
Yeah. Can I just ask about food waste reduction 9%? Trying to work out whether that's good or bad news. Is it because people are just being more careful, not wasting food, or is it going to residual?
So we have undertaken last year. We undertook a food waste reduction, some food waste reduction campaign. So an awareness. So what we do as part of that communications program is we encourage people to segregate their food waste. And then once they've segregated, we ask them to look at how much they produce, and then to try and reduce the volumes that they are producing. So I would hope that some of the reduction is a result of that. And of course, we have had the cost of living crisis. So I suspect that an element of that reduction is simply due to people being more attentive over what they're buying and what they are throwing away. So a combination of the two.
Thank you.
And then Barry Listener?
Yeah, just highlighting what Councillor Roche said about the reduction to less than 200,000 tonnes, which is a good thing. How confident are we of those figures? Because I know there have been some issues with data that's been apportioned to some. For the last quarter, some was apportioned to Sutton, it should have been apportioned to Croydon, or vice versa. And what sort of audit do you do on that data to say, yeah, it is truly 195,239 tonnes, because that's quite a precise, tonne is big, it's still quite a precise figure.
So that's a really good question, and I think so. The total tonnage that we deliver into that residual waste treatment contract, as far as that contractor is concerned, is SLWP tonnage in the first instance. So the total figure, we can be very confident that the total figure is accurate. In terms of the apportionment and the audit trail that we go through, it's incredibly extensive. There are an awful large number of tickets and tips that are processed. If you think that total tonnage is probably broken down into individual loads of 8, 9, 10 tonnes per tip, there's a huge amount of data that we go through. There are some very clever processes that we can go through with the finance and data people that look at the tickets, who the drivers are, when the material is booked in, all sorts of checks that we do that enable us to actually see that that ticket was booked in incorrectly. So the reason we're aware of the tickets being booked incorrectly is because we've got all these checks and measures in place. They do take time. It's just the sheer volume of tickets, of individual tips. They do take time, those checks, and they can cause delays. but we'd rather the information be accurate and correct before we go to publish. So yes, there are sometimes delays in giving you the information because we have to move tickets around. But that is because we've got those checks in place and we've got all those measures in place to reassure you of that.
Can I ask an unrelated follow-up? It's not really a follow-up, is it? So with the food waste, we have had some issues, and it's very difficult to pin down, but with biocollectors in particular. Residents have complained about odours, which they think are coming from biocollectors. Obviously, it's one of those things that's quite difficult to pin down. Can I just have your comments on how effective not only biocollectors but the other for green waste managers are?
Yeah, operators. Yeah. So as waste operators, all of the companies that we use, they will waste operators in general will be very used to they will be very mindful of sensitive receptors, and they will have a lot of measures in place to check for odour and have a lot of operational measures in place in order to prevent that odour from escaping from their facilities. So, for example, fast shutting doors and have segregation. Obviously, food waste is received indoors, etc., etc. There are, on occasions, I think there is often an assumption that the odours will come from a waste site, whereas there are perhaps other industries or other operations in the area that might also be the cause, but because they are so high profile, the waste sites are often the first to be assumed to be the emitters of the bad odours. But we do regular checks. The contracts team will do regular checks. We'll do regular site visits, and as part of that, we'll make sure that they're putting in place all of those operational techniques that manage odour and ensure that it's not causing a nuisance to local sensitive receptors. So yeah, we've not found an issue with that site, and I don't believe the environmental health yet.
One more comment, just on that. I mean, I think it would be helpful. We visited some of the main sites, and we're all familiar with the HRCs, which are in our boroughs. We're probably quite familiar with the ERF. We've had the opportunity to that. Would it be something that we could look at doing, perhaps to visit some of the smaller sites, such as biocollectors, just to see how it works? Because I'd be quite interested to see how do they turn out my rotten eggshells into energy or whatever happens.
Absolutely. So, I think that's a really good idea, and it is a fascinating site. The way they operate and how they turn it into electricity and clean up the gases. Yeah.
I have asked them about resident visits because, as you know, we've now got a rolling programme of visits to the ERF and to the MRF, to the Veolia MRF, where we recycle and sort it. That published on our website. People can go and book onto it. I really wanted to get an AD facility on there as well, so we have a full suite. I think because they're much smaller, they're not really geared up for that kind of regular visit. I'm sure we could do something for members. That won't be a problem. And maybe we could use that as a bit of a dip the toe in and see if that's a success. There might be more open mind to sort of residents coming around.
Do you want to add anything on the food waste campaign as well?
Yeah, no, it was just the point. Your point about should we be worried about reduction in food waste is really interesting one. It's one that I've thought about a lot doing these campaigns. I think the main thing to say is if we were seeing a reduction in food waste tons and an increase in residual, that would be concerning because that would suggest that food waste is going from food waste. But we're also seeing an even bigger reduction in residual. So that would suggest this is genuinely that people are producing less food waste. And I think Andrew's right. I think cost of living, I think the campaigns we run, I think the first step, what we really want is really high participation rates in food waste recycling. We want everyone using the service, but we want low volumes. That's the perfect scenario from a carbon perspective.
Yeah.
Because there is some unavoidable food waste, and that's all that should be going in those food waste bins in an ideal way.
Thank you.
Oh, great. Thanks, Chair. First question of the year, first visit, first attendance. I'm interested in the fact, and my apologies if I haven't cited it in the papers, with respect to the question of contamination. In other words, how are we tracking the behaviour of our residents and our stakeholders? You know, is it trending the right way? So are people producing less contamination? They're getting it right in terms of their behaviour, which is making our processes streamlined. And I will jump in with a part B to my question. South West London is the fastest growing community for the very large and soon to be much larger Hong Kong Chinese British passport holder community. Given the fact that many of these new residents are coming from an environment where they are used to very sophisticated urban living, but also maybe unused to our way of, in terms of local government and in terms of service provision, are we trying to get ahead of the game by doing something targeted? Because statistically, no disrespect to places like Durham and Brum and whatever, they're coming to South West London in very large numbers. You know, and I raise that because I'd like us to be proactive rather than in 2 years' time go, oh yes, maybe we should have done some engagement. So thank you, Chair. 2 questions.
Thank you. Yeah, really interesting. In terms of contamination, we'll talk about that one first. When it comes to food waste, because the receptacles, the size of the receptacles are small, we get very little contamination issues. So we're really happy with food waste. We will continue to keep, you know, updating residents and talking to residents about what goes into the food waste bins. And we've got a lot of information on our partnership website about what should go into those containers as well and where it goes, because I think that's interesting as well. And the same for green waste. We did go through a phase of having green garden furniture in green waste. I'm not sure where the confusion of that message came from, but that was a few years ago now, and we seem to have resolved that. The green garden waste is not a green chair from your garden. So we seem to have got past that. So we tend to have really good, very low contamination levels for our food and our green. And obviously, you know, it doesn't come under, you know, the joint committee, but in terms of mixed recycling, obviously we're not alone. It's something that we work on and we will continue to work on. And it's not something that you ever rest on, because legislation changes, more things come into the recycling stream that we can accept. So it is always an ongoing activity that we support the boroughs with. In terms of being proactive with communications with our changing demographic, I think it is a really good point. We are rapidly expanding, aren't we? And we're diversifying, which is great. And I think it's always on the radar, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we've done at the last committee meeting, and I'll talk about it a bit in a minute, is the new partnership website, which features something called Bin Smart, which is an encyclopedia of recycling, and it's kind of lots of information about how to responsibly dispose of lots of different types of waste. And one of the really good things about that is you can translate it to 100 different languages, and about 65 of those languages you can also have it spoken to in that language. So we've got some really good tools now that we can go out and spread the word, but I'll certainly look into that suggestion and see what we can do to reach out to those. There'll be community groups, etc. We might be able to work. So thank you for that.
And it was just to say that I think we should give it to biofactors, but just to kind of to build on that, maybe it would be worth just to kind of get a bit of an understanding of how we're monitoring, what that monitoring looks like. You know, what happens when complaints come in over to South London Park-based Partnership, actually the ones who raise it with the EA, or expecting boroughs to raise it with the EA or individual councillors, because that actually it came from us as a partnership. It might be a bit of a stronger if it did turn out that there was something that wasn't as it should be. And just a point about the residual waste, could it be that people just returned to work after COVID and now we're suddenly getting back to a place where we're finally starting to just pour more and everything?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what I wanted to add.
Okay. Good point. So in terms of the complaints procedure, we will, as the contract managers, you know, particularly with the treatment and disposal contracts, it is very much our role to, if a complaint comes in, we will investigate that and we will take that up with the contractor. We have regular contract meetings and regular site visits as well. So whenever there is a complaint, we will take it upon ourselves to investigate that, because that's good contract management. So we would take that up. And if we were concerned and if we did feel that there were measures that needed to be taken, then we can start that process with the contractor directly. And only then, if we don't get traction, would we probably go to the Environment Agency due to their resources. In terms of the residual waste, I think, when you look at that Appendix A, that there's a table at 3A, and I think that really sort of sets it out really nicely, because it takes us all the way back to 2014. So pre-pandemic. So you can see the residual waste tonnes in 2014-15 were 233,000, and they were steadily increasing. As population increased, 238, 240. I'm testing my eyes here. And then obviously the ERF came online in 2019, and we did 2017. I'm forgetting the key service changes. How did I skip over that? 2017 was when we first rolled out those service changes, where we did schemes like minimising slimming the bin, side waste reduction, etc., twin stream recycling. So that's when we harmonised those collection services. You can see obviously the COVID year, things did increase, but then now actually we're back to well under pre-COVID levels. So it's really is a good news story. Yeah, really positive.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, thank you. I would like to thank the committee for their contributions and for the additional clarity provided by partnership officers. And as chair, and in line with the recommendations tabled within the report, I can confirm on behalf of the committee that this report is noted. Can you second? Yes. Okay. Very much. Item number 6, the budget update final outturns for 22-23. In the absence of the partnership financial lead, I would like to invite partnership director Andrea Keys to present the financial outturn report for the last financial year 2023.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, as just explained, this paper provides an outturn position on the partnerships budget for the full financial year 22-23. So at month 12, for the final outturn is an underspend of just under £12,000, so £11,787 against the budget, and that will be refunded back to the boroughs. I'll talk a little bit through the detail and where that underspend came from. So you can see at 3.1, the core budget, that refers to the advisors, corporate support, the core staff resources that make up the partnership, as well as document management. So there was a small overspend in that category, and that was due to an overspend in relation to interim staffing. So we had some interim staffing while we were recruiting to some vacant posts, and that accounts for the overspend in that category. 3.3, we had a communications and improvement projects category. Communication improvement projects reported an overall underspend of just under 32,000. 3.4, we've got the strategy and commissioning category, and you can see that there was a variance of just under 7,000. The budget exceedance for intelligence gathering elements of that budget follows a higher than anticipated cost for our intelligence gathering exercises, most notably the labour intensive projects such as waste composition analysis and survey work. Obviously our budgets were set prior to what was quite a significant increase in labour, and those projects relied heavily on labour. In addition to a general increase in cost to deliver these projects, the scope of our waste composition analysis was increased, so we wanted to include food waste sampling, and then we also widened the scope of our carbon baseline projects as well. The forecasted underspend, there was an underspend in the commissioning resources, and that was achieved by using our internal team to undertake a lot of the commissioning work rather than outsourcing that. So the recommendations are to note the contents of the report.
Does any committee member have any points of clarification? I just have one. How does the overall budget compare in the last 10 years?
How does this budget compare
Yeah.
to in terms of total spend? So, goodness me, over the last 10 years, so we have had a number of over the last 10 years, we've had a number of commissioning projects. I would say that the core staffing element of our budget tends to stay quite consistent. There has been one restructure that took place following agreement in February 22 for a new structure. But other than that, it's been broadly consistent in that first category, that category of core partnership team activity, that core budget. Where we see fluctuation, and the biggest fluctuation that we see in our partnership budget is related to our commissioning projects. So, for example, when we did a major commission, I'm trying to think, does it go back to, we were commissioning the residual waste treatment contract probably in 2012. So that would have had an impact on our budget all the way back then. That's 11 years back. That's going too far back now. But there'll be peaks and troughs largely connected to the commissioning projects that we're working on. And so last year's, for example, was we were very focused on making sure we had the right intelligence gathering exercises so that our decision making, very much for this joint waste strategy that we're going to be talking about probably towards next year, the early part of next year, making sure that the decisions that we make are data driven. So the carbon baseline, waste composition analysis, in order to measure success, we need to know where we've started from. So we've invested a lot in intelligence gathering in this last 2-3 years as well. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you. As chair and in line with the recommendations in the report, I confirm on behalf of the committee this report is noted. Can this be seconded, please?
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much. Right, item number 7. So it's the communication update report with 2-year communications plan. So I'd like to invite John Haynes to present this communications report, in which we are asked to note the contents of the report, approve the 2-year South London Waste Partnership communications plan for 23-24, 24-25 as illustrated in Appendix A, approve the delegation of authority to agree any agreed and required minor amendments to the South London Waste Communications Plan, to the chair of the South London Waste Partnership Joint Committee and the chair of the South London Waste Partnership Strategic Management. So John, would you want to go through?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, so this report, these reports normally cover 3-month periods, but it's not been that long since the last meeting, actually. So this particular report covers the 2 months of April and May. If I start off at section 1, as we've just heard, the SLWP communications plan for the 2-year period, 23-24 and 24-25. Again, these plans are normally 3-year plans, and they follow immediately on from our triennial resident survey, and they're sort of heavily influenced by the findings from that survey. We have just finished the triennial survey, and I presented the findings from that, I think, the time before last, this committee meeting. But again, the same as Andrew was speaking earlier about the work programme, it makes more sense given all the changes that we've got coming up in 2025 with the boroughs commissioning new contracts for collections and street cleansing. It makes a lot of sense for the comms plan to kind of fall into that timeline as well. So this is a 2-year comms plan this time round. And the idea of this plan, it's very high level. It's got lots of plans and strategies and project plans that sit underneath it to make sure all these things are delivered properly. But this is just to make sure that we're all in agreement that, our sites are focused on the key things. So if I can just draw your attention, it's on page 25 of your packs, the actual plan itself. I'll just spend a few minutes just running through, highlighting some of the key points. So the plan, as I say, is based on evidence and feedback. So we've got the triennial resident survey that we conducted in 2022 with DJS Research, and that gave us some information to go on. And that's I think it's the 5th triennial survey we've done, so we've got lots of historic data going back as well. There's the waste composition analysis that we ran with Resource Futures in 2022 as well, which has given us lots of information about what's in our bins, what's in our recycling containers, so that we can know what we're dealing with. And then there's all of the work the boroughs did, sort of, individually, but also through the partnership on engaging your residents late last year, early this year, in terms of that co-design stuff, what residents want for the future from their services, what's important to them, what their priorities are going forward. And we had well over 6,000 residents take part in that consultation exercise across the 4 boroughs. So from all of that, we've got sort of 5 key priorities: food, flats, faith, funding, and future. So let's start off with food. We know from the waste composition analysis that it's probably our biggest opportunity in terms of what's in those residual waste bins. It's about 30% of what's in the average bin by weight. So there's a huge opportunity there to get some of that stuff out. And it's also it's not only a sort of huge carbon and environmental benefit, but a great opportunity for the boroughs to save money as well, because for every tonne of food waste you get out of the residual waste stream and into the food waste recycling stream, it saves you £100 per tonne in treatment costs. So it's very easy to kind of build business cases, as it were, to invest in behaviour change campaigns, because you can actually measure that and see where that money is being returned. So it's good on both counts. So I think for the next 2 years, I feel that we should continue to focus on food waste for those reasons. We've been running some very successful campaigns over the last couple of years in partnership with Veolia, targeting particular parts of our boroughs, particular rounds where we think that participation in the food waste recycling is lower than it should be. We know from that we see an increase of about 10% in participation by going around counting how many houses put out their bins before and after the campaign, so we can be fairly confident of that. We also see that in those target areas, we see increases of about 35 kilograms per property per annum. But as we've mentioned earlier, there's a slight, I wouldn't want to get too hooked up on the weight, because it's not all about the waste of food waste. We'd rather that food waste disappeared altogether. So, but it is interesting to see that where we run the campaign, we do also see an increase in the amount of food waste we're collecting. So that's food. The second one is flats. Currently, about 26% of our properties across the partnership region are on a communal service, so larger shared bins rather than their own wheelie bins. And that figure is growing quite quickly, given the number of kind of higher rise blocks that we see. It tends to be anything over about 6 households. If you've got a block with more than 6 households, you would generally go onto the communal service rather than have your standard wheelie bins. We know that satisfaction with the collection service is much lower for people that live in communal properties and those that live in households. And we know that they don't recycle as much, partly because you've got this problem where you might have 30 people using it properly, and it only takes 1 or 2 people in that block to not do it properly, and it can ruin it for everyone. So that's part of the challenge. The other key challenge we have with flats is that it's very difficult to educate and to push back on the recycling when you get contamination, because you don't necessarily know which household caused it, and you can't you don't want to penalise everyone for one individual household doing not quite the right thing. So it's a massive challenge, flats, as we know. But we need to keep focusing on it. We need to keep going with it, because it's a significant and increasing proportion of our properties. One of the things we want to do is we want to work more with managing agents and with social landlords to try and encourage them to play a greater role in terms of improving the service that we can offer to flats. So that's going to be a key priority for us. The third priority is faith, and that's looking at trust and confidence in our recycling waste management systems. There are 2 elements to this. The first one is that people need to have confidence that their recycling is being handled properly, and that their efforts to sort recycling out is worth it, because it's actually getting recycled. We know that in 2016, 38% of people had concern about that, and that's increased to 43% in 2022. So we need to try and reverse that trend and restore faith in the system. So what we're going to do with that is we're going to develop the destination recycling pages on the SLWP website, which provide lots of information about where waste goes, what it's turned into. We also want to explore publishing an annual report of off-takers. So on an annual basis, we can create a really nice kind of easy to understand document that residents can be referred to. It will also help us answer a lot of FOI inquiries, which will be quite useful. But that will show exactly where waste went, by the tonne, exactly where it was sent, what it was turned into for each individual year. And we want to increase the availability and visibility of visits to our facilities, which is something we've already started to work on. Just to reassure people that there's nothing to hide here. You know, you can come and you can have a look around these places and see how your waste is being treated. The other phase that we want to focus on is the Beddington ERF. We know that around 3/4 of residents agree that energy from waste is preferable to landfill. They can see that it's the right thing to be doing with our waste. But around 40% of residents also do have concerns around the emissions and the environmental and health impact of those emissions. So I think we need to get on the front foot and work with Viridor to deliver some sort of social media campaigns to push people. We've got an excellent website for the Beddington ERF, and we want to push more people to that website so that they can get the information they need. Number 4 is funding. We know that budgets are an increasing challenge for councils, but also the cost of delivering large-scale behaviour change campaigns is increasing rapidly, particularly those that require labour costs, like Andrew said, where we're going out doing participation monitoring of bins, stickering things on bins. Those costs are going up. So we want to go out. We've been quite good with funding. You know, last year we got £25,000 from Re London to help us with our waste composition analysis. But I think there's more out there that we could be doing. I think there are commercial companies in the area that might want to join and in return for some joint branding on some of these campaigns, for example. There are also some new opportunities like extended producer responsibility. We need to make sure we're right at the front of the queue when it comes to sort of maximising those opportunities. So funding is going to be key. And then the final one is future. So as I said before, the next 2 years are going to be a real period of significant change for the boroughs and for the partnership. We want to do 2 things really. We want to particularly work very closely with Veolia to make sure their comms and engagement standards are maintained for the final 2 years of the contract, which I'm confident they will be. We want to make sure and support the boroughs in ensuring a smooth handover of any responsibilities when it comes to comms and engagement from 2025 onwards. And we want to make sure that comms and engagement work are appropriately resourced, budgeted for, planned for. You know, we've learned a lot over the last 8 years managing that contract. We want to make sure that we share that with you and help you as much as we possibly can. And then looking ahead, you know, what do we still want to do as a partnership when it comes to comms and engagement? Are there waste minimisation campaigns that we can run at a sub-regional level, which will have more impact than doing it as 4 boroughs? Is there lobbying and you know, that sort of stuff? Do 4 voices have more impact than 1? So there will still be things that we want to do as a partnership. So we need to identify what those are. So they're the main sort of focus areas. And the last bit of the plan just points out that, you know, all of that's going to be supported by solid foundations. So we've got the new website, we've got the new Bin Smart tool, which I think we can develop and continue to work on. And we'll obviously be continuing to work with Veolia, Viridor, Suez to make sure they're delivering their kind of contractual commitments when it comes to comms and engagement for the next 2 years. So that's the comms plan. I'll take some questions, but maybe I'll just finish off running through the report first, if that's okay. I'll be very quick with the rest of it. Section 2 talks about the new website. It went live on the 10th of May as planned. All went smoothly from a technical perspective, so very pleased about that. And hopefully you will have a chance to have a look at it. And we'll be continuing to develop that site in the sort of months and years to come. Section 4 talk about the Beddington ERF. The main thing I wanted to talk about on that was the site visits at 4.7 in my report. We've got an open day on Tuesday the 20th of June, which we've already got lots of people signed up for, but there are still some spaces. So your comms teams have all been provided with content, social media content to promote that and push people to sign up. They are also hosting the Sutton Environment Group Champions Group. We'll be going to the ERF for a visit this month. And also the Sutton Head Teachers Network holding their next meeting there. So the point I'm making is that it's really nice to have that facility available again. We had those COVID years where Viridor were sort of, understandably very cautious about letting people onto the site, but that's behind us now, and we're able to get people onto the site. So really keen to get schools, groups, resident groups round the site to have a look. So that's good. And then finally, section 5, this talks about collections and street cleansing. And I always remind the committee that although it's not strictly in the remit of this committee, I like to provide an update to give you a sort of full picture of the work that we've been doing. The garden waste service promotional campaign that we ran in the spring. So we ran a hyper-targeted direct mail campaign. We used some new techniques this year using low demographic data to add into the mix to help us really drill down on who we're going to send our targeted mail campaign out to. We sent it to just over 13,500 properties, and we got analysis has shown that 1,223 of those properties actually signed up to the service. That's a conversion rate of 9%. We had a target of 5%, and generally in previous years we've managed to get 3 to 4, so even 5 felt quite challenging. So a 9% conversion rate, I'm really, really pleased with it. It shows that addition of the demographic data has really added to it. So that's great news. That's potentially waste diverted out, into our garden waste service, which is great. It's obviously additional income for the borough, so good news. We also ran a digital campaign to support that direct mail campaign. We ran it across Meta, which is Facebook and Instagram, and Google. We used a new video-based asset that had a more sort of organic feel to it, so it didn't kind of jump out quite as much when you were scrolling through your stream, which is where these kind of social media advertising seems to be heading. And really importantly, this year, for the first time, we were able to embed trackers on the Sutton and Kingston websites, because they have a shared IT department, that allowed us to know for certain of the people that saw the digital ads, how many of them actually went and signed up to the service. And that's the first time we've been able to do that. And I've dropped some figures in there for you to see. You can see for Kingston and Sutton, we're looking at sort of, for the Meta campaign, it's about 1.5% conversion rate. And for Google, it's about 10 to 13% conversion rate, but the costs are different. You can see there's a cost per acquisition there, which is about £20 for Meta and about £10 for Google. So that's pretty good. If you think that the subscription's around £80, it's costing us 10 to 20 to get them on board. And of course, the hope is they'll stay subscribers for many, many years. So that acquisition cost is only a one-off. So we'll obviously be using all that data to make next year's campaign even better. 5.3, the plastic waste and carbon awareness campaign. I've provided some sort of just some summary information on that campaign and what it might look like, but I'll bring a much more detailed update in the next committee meeting with some kind of visions of how that's going to look. But this is a campaign that's raising awareness amongst residents of the link between plastic waste and carbon emissions at BRF, and making them all aware that not when it comes to carbon, not all waste is equal, effectively. So. And I think finally, 5.9, the contamination and excess waste programme. So this is part of our process where residents that produce excess waste or contaminate their recycling, they get tags, then they get letters from the council, then they get letters from Veolia, then a letter from the council. And if they continue to do this, they get a list for a visit by a recycling advisor for a door knock. We had to suspend that during COVID. And since COVID, the companies that we use to deliver that for us just don't seem to be able to offer it at a reasonable price. The costs have just rocketed. So we've decided from May that we were actually going to bring that in-house effectively, and Veolia were going to use their own staff to do the door knocking and to do that engagement. So in May, we knocked 117 properties across the Partnership region that had sort of, continually produced excess waste or contaminated their recycling. And any that were there, we sort of spoke to them and talked to them, did a bit of a survey. Any that weren't there, they got a sorry listed postcard with a little handwritten note on it to make it clear that someone actually came to my door about this, a service information booklet. And also we audited the bins that were out the front, if possible, to see was there anything missing, was it being broken, was there an obvious reason for this issue that was being informed. So it's a start. I've met with Veolia already to review that, how it went, see what we can do to improve it for next time. But I'm really pleased to get that door knocking off the ground again, because I think it's a really important kind of final stage in the process before we kind of ratchet up through enforcement and all that sort of stuff. That's it from me. Thank you. Jay, taking the questions.
Open up to committee members. That's all.
Yeah, just thinking, we've got a section here for flats and food waste, but I'm wondering, got a specific way of targeting young people who don't recycle very much. It was needed a separate category for them.
Yeah, you do, and you're right. That sort of 16 to 34-year-old age group we know are not as good at recyclers as we might like to think they are. It's partly about tenure, property type. A lot of them are sharing and sort of HMOs, and it's that kind of who takes responsibility for the bins. I think that's a big part of it. And also, it's kind of I think. Even when you speak to, because I've been on focus groups where we, And it's always kind of, yeah, I know I should, and I just don't, yeah, it's like something that I'm going to do in a few years' time. I will get better at it. So yeah, I think it's just something that needs to feed through to all of our comms. I think the channels that we use, we're increasingly using sort of digital channels, which I'm not convinced so much anymore. There is that age split. I think there's an awful lot of older people that are using digital channels now as well. But yeah, the messaging that we use. So I think it's something that we just need to feed through all of our channels and our messaging rather than have a particular campaign aimed at age group.
Oh, thanks for that. And I have to say, fascinating insights. I'm interested in the post-contamination intervention program, for a better word, because you've explained it very well. You've given me a picture of it. I'm just wondering, now that we've brought it back, early days, post-pandemic, is it envisaged that possibly within the next 3 or so months, we might be able to get something as simple as a 90-second or 2-minute YouTube video, so that there's some active visualization of, you know, the story starts, contamination, and then the steps? Because I literally think the way you explained it, I'd love to take that story to residents groups, because people would like to know what happens as it escalates.
Yeah.
Because the intervention by the officer is actually a good news story.
Yeah, great idea. Yeah, I'd be happy. I'm sure that's something we can do. It was so during COVID, we were still sending out the letters, not for excess waste, because I think there was a lot of disruptions to collections, etc., but for contamination. So the letters and the tagging have always continued. It's just that final door knocking bit that was paused. So it is good news. But yeah, I can certainly do that. Good idea.
Yeah, and if you get stuck, we're happy to help.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So can I just ask for clarity on one of the recommendations, which is the approved delegation of authority for any required minor amendments? Just to clarify, what are we meaning by minor? If I can comment on, I'm not sure that I like the 5Fs on it, but it's, yeah, I can see why you've done it.
Spent ages on that.
But the one of faith, I think is really important, and let's just highlight the recycling myths that are going around. And yeah, I don't know whether other boroughs have the same issue, but people, oh, you're putting it all in the same truck. You're taking it to the ERF. And one of the issues is that we have in Sutton, I don't know if in other boroughs as well, but there are some, shall I say, community leaders in inverted commas, sometimes they're other councillors, who will perpetuate those myths, and however much you say that this is what's happening to really clear. So yeah, I think getting that message out to members, to the public, that, you know, we're not out to pull the wool over their eyes. We are there to provide councils and South London Waste Partnership to provide a service to recycle, to ultimately reduce our carbon and all the things we want to do. And the last sort of comment question, I suppose it's about the green waste bins campaign. So the videos you're talking about, are they the ones where you have that smug person standing at his door whilst his
neighbour was trying to shove his branches and sticks into a boot?
Yeah, I don't go onto Facebook that often, but I did seem to see them an awful lot. So
you must have been around target then.
Yeah,
have you got a garden?
We've got a garden, and I think the important thing to remember, obviously, the revenues that come in from that are used to improve council services, improve our waste services, etc. So yeah, it's great that we can spend that and get that income. But it's important to remind people that income is used for the benefit of residents within our communities.
Absolutely, yeah. And that video, we've got some. I'm meeting with the digital agency next week actually to review in real detail how that performs, because we A/B tested against the more sort of static stuff that we used the previous year. So we A/B tested. About halfway through the campaign, it became really obvious that video was performing so much better that we effectively just kind of rolled back the static passages of the video, which probably only saw some bits of it. So it does appear to have been quite effective. So
Can you just clarify the recommendation?
Yeah, sorry. So I think that's just to say, because it's quite high level. For example, I think those key headline focus areas, we wouldn't change any of those without your approval, for example. But within them, for example, so even since I wrote this document focuses on working with managing agents and social landlords. But since then, over the last few weeks, we've been talking about trying to work out if there's a way of replicating or creating a contamination and excess waste process that does work as commonwealths. Now, hugely challenging. No one's done it yet, but why not? Let's try and do the first thing. So, things like that. So that might be added into the plan, or there's a reference to supporting boroughs with some of their borough-specific projects. We talked earlier about the fact that some boroughs might have different priorities. So, for example, I know you're into your Sutton spring clean. Kingston are launching an electronic fleet of collection vehicles. You've got your Love Merton campaign that we've been supporting. So it's just about sort of having flexibility to make decisions like that without having to come back. But it would be done in conjunction with the chair and with the chair of the strategic management group. So there would be that kind of, and if they felt, no, that's a change I'm not comfortable with, it needs to come back in.
And we get an update on this report once a year, is it?
Yeah, well, I think what I'd do is now, once we've got that structure and those 5 priority areas, I'll sort of try and make these regular updates kind of fit in that structure. So you're getting those updates and seeing how we're doing. Thank you.
So it's great to see everything laid out, and I think definitely focus on flats is a big key priority for us. Of course, we're a very large state. Just wanted to kind of call out some really good work that's happening in Pollard's Hill with Moat Housing. They partnered with the local charity St. Merton, who have created this We Are Pollard's Hill scheme, where they have people do litter picks, but also they've created they ran a competition with local children to create signs to go on the bins, so people are very clear about what goes in each bin. I know that sometimes those things don't necessarily get traction, but I think there is a sense of ownership of how the estate looks and how it feels, and it seems to be gone down very well and just over time and it works. That is quite labour intensive though, so it might be worth partnering with sort of an organisation that's done it before and understands kind of what's needed. And then also though to the flats thing, the information, the issue we talked about before about HMOs, it might be worth having a little bit of a splinter group of this when we talk about flats, because HMOs are going to themselves are going to become also a problem. So a lot of the issues we have with the estates and HMOs is that none of these properties were designed for the amount of people that live there. So a lot of our flats have large estates have more people on them than they should do because of the housing crisis. So it produces more waste. So how we, it's all well and good us saying don't throw away one bag, but actually you've got 5 people in a 1-bedroom flat. So I think we just have to be very careful of our messaging on that, rather than penalising people being overcrowded.
Yeah, it's about that. That's why I think if I completely agree, and I'll check out the Pollard's Hill. It might be good to go and see that. To look at what they're doing there. I think with that's why I think it's really important that we try and work more with managing agents and social landlords to understand the challenges better, not just assume that it's that residents aren't trying or aren't doing their thing. Maybe it's that the infrastructure is not quite right, it's not working, bin stores not big enough that, whatever it might be, because I don't think it's going to be solved purely by behaviour change campaign. I think it's behaviour change plus other things that are in there as well.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, when we've talked about this scheme for flats, we've always been very clear in our conversations that it's not going to be a one-size-fits-all, because every single estate has a different feel. What worked at Pollard's Hill might not work at the next estate, and so it really does. It's a really challenging project, and it does need to consider each of those estates and those categories individually. Yeah.
And Charles has some clarity.
Yes, probably it might be worthwhile following on from John's point around the additional clarity around minor amendments to the recommendations that the committee's been asked to approve. It clearly does, it references the chair of the Joint Waste Committee, but it also is in partnership with the Strategic Management Group. So that's ultimately the environment and corporate directors within each of the lead boroughs. So in order for that group to agree that minor amendment, I would expect the individual cabinet members to be briefed by their officers prior to them being in a position to authorise that minor amendment. So I think there is some internal governance within the boroughs that seek committee members' assurances around any agreement of what is minor and isn't minor. And that would give the committee members the opportunity to ask for an amendment to be escalated to the committee board.
So yeah, I had a few comments about the website. It looks really good. The can I recite it search bar at the top of the page I thought was a good idea. Is there a way you can list top hitters, so the ones that people are searching for the most? So it's then maybe it makes them think. Because for example, I didn't until recently think crisp packets, not recently, but maybe a few years ago, crisp packets can be recycled. And if I'm type, oh, crisp packets at the top of the list, didn't realise that wasn't. So it's just encouraging people to check other things. They might be going to check one item, but it might trigger them to think of other items. And another point I had was when you click on our links on the top of the page, it takes us to our council's website advertising the committee, but I guess it's for all of us to talk about. We don't have a linking it back to the South London Waste budget. So if you're going straight to there, it doesn't actually tell anyone about South London Waste budget, the website, just the committee. So that was my and the last one was just looking maybe at the order of things on that page, because I felt the partnership's right at the top in terms of what is the partnership. I felt quite honestly that should be towards the bottom. It should be the campaigns and what's new towards the top, because as a person going to the website, yes, it's interesting to know, but they're probably more interested about what campaigns, food and what's new in terms of what we're achieving as a partnership. Those are just my points. If you had any comments on any of that, really.
Yeah, I'm glad you like it. I think the Bin Smart tool, as we're calling it, I think you're right, that cross kind of pollination, that kind of I came for one thing, but that's interesting, is really key, isn't it? I think what we've tried to do is that it's all based around quite a clever search facility. So if you type in crisp packet, you'll pick it up, but it won't take you to I think crisp packet's a bad example, maybe there is a dedicated page, but it will pick up crisp packets, but it's part of soft plastics. So you'll find out, oh, I can do crisp packets, but oh look, I can also do food pouches and I can do single-use plastic bags. But yeah, we can tweak. There's more development to come. It's a kind of a starting point. It's a really powerful search engine, so I think there's more we can do on that. In terms of links from council websites, I agree. I'd love for there to be more going back. I think there are some things obviously that the residents are always going to come to the boroughs for. Reporting miscollection, requests to container, that sort of stuff. Your websites are very transactional focused. They're very good at that. They get people to do things quickly and efficiently. What I think the partnership website can do to supplement or complement that is to tell a narrative, to tell a story about, for example, what happens to your waste recycling after it's collected. And that's the sort of thing that, having worked in a council environment, I know I might have got a bit of pushback from my IT team saying it's not very transactional, so we're not having that. So that's where we could be linking out to the partnership website, say, if you want to find out more about what happens to go here. So to be fair to the boroughs, I think up until the 10th of May, the partnership's website was a little bit embarrassing. So I think now we have a much better website. I'm hoping that they will.
Council websites aren't exactly thrilling, are they?
Well, they do a good job. So hopefully the boroughs will be a little bit more willing and open-minded to link out, because I think you're right. And campaigns, yes. I mean, we can move the homepage around a little bit. I think there's still a lot of misunderstanding about the partnership and about what the partnership does and its role. And I think Andrew's point earlier, it's a voluntary partnership. The partnership is just for boroughs. So I think there's a role for that maybe we can look at the balance. The reason the campaign section is so key is because most people coming through to the campaigns won't come to the homepage. They will come straight to a particular campaign page. And I know you're very keen, Councillor, on QR codes, something I've noted. So we're going to start, on all of our campaigns going forward. For example, we've got the big food waste campaign coming up this year. We'll be adding a QR code that links you straight through to the campaign page on food waste, and the same with the plastics campaign as well. So, but we can certainly look at that homepage. We need to start looking, now it's live and it's been live for a few weeks, start looking at the user data and how people are using it, where people are coming in, and we can start tweaking the website based on that.
Right, so it's certainly a big improvement. It's
Thank you.
going in the right
Good.
direction. Tony, members?
Just on the flats issue, the data I see there in terms of their generally poor performance on recycling, I think are quite generic and I presume are done from surveys or something. Is there any way we can measure the performance of, if I've got a block of flats of, I don't know, 24 flats, is there a way of easily measuring that block of flats performance? Or is that just something that
it's
considerable extra effort?
Goodness, so
Sorry.
it's, it's a good question. I mean, we are constantly looking at ways to enable us to process higher amounts of contamination, so we can try to get capture as much material as we can. We have been working with the collections contractor on having better inspections and sort of creating a list of where there are particular estates that need more assistance than others. And I think we need to do more work in that area. It is really challenging though when you think about how this material is presented and how much you can do at that point, at that curbside point. But we are looking at it. I think there's a role for the collections, there's a role for communications, and operationally there's a role for the collections. There's then a role further down for the
No, what I'm talking about is direct measurements. I mean, give an example. In my ward, I've got an estate which has got 24 blocks of flats, varying between 12 and 36, low rise. And if I got a means that I could measure how much waste I'm getting and how much recycling from those blocks of flats by, and then just sending the one truck around that lifts up the communal waste bins and measuring how often it goes back again, it's direct measurement of performance rather than sending things through doors and hoping things happen. Has anybody done it?
I mean, operationally, you'd probably need onboard weighing or some sort of technology that will enable you to say, right, I'm at this particular estate, I've picked up three residual waste and I've picked up two recycling, and then that would produce a weight. The short answer is no, we don't do that specifically for, we don't do that on board weighing. Could we do it? I think it would be, it would require some investment and it would be quite intensive. I suppose what we need to assess is what would we do with that information? What is it that we want to gain from that information? Can we get enough information from visual inspections? I'm quite keen on this audit approach that we're taking. So it wouldn't give us results down to a tonnage specifically, but it would enable us to do that kind of visual. Are they recycling? Do we think it's going to pass on threshold?
I've got an estate that's quite well contained. There's a secondary school that almost double the same kids go to. It's a primary school. So it is quite a self-contained piece, working through the schools, giving them, the data so they can plot it. 7 or 8 year olds can plot it. 15-year-olds can analyse it. It's some kind of measurement.
Like a waste audit.
Yeah, or if we send one truck there, that goes around the estate, 24 blocks. Did it get filled up after the 10th flat or after the 15th flat? It's that kind of thing.
Yeah.
I mean, is it something I can have a dialogue with you guys about?
Yeah, let me have a think about how we can do it. I mean, it's balancing the cost of something like that with the output, and it's a valuable bit of data.
I'm not going to try and do it at zero cost.
No, I know. It's I'm just, but I'm sure there is a method whether we use assumed weights for containers, so for 1100 litre container versus a 360 or whatever we can, or whether we actually do take a physical vehicle and measure it to the exact.
I'm writing a sort of project spec for you, so rather than big here.
Yeah, let's have a think about that. I think it's an interesting idea. So let's have a think about that. There's definitely ways to do it, and it's about how specific and accurate you want to be, I suppose, in each of those.
Well, I want to do it before and after, and so
broad brush. Yeah.
But anyway, let's.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah, happy to do that.
No? Oh, great, thanks. And just a quick question which possibly follows up on the do we do it at cost or not type of thing. What's our track record? And if we haven't got one, can we consider maybe this year as a potential starting point of working with major developers, major building companies in southwest London, because all four of our authorities have pockets of relatively intense regeneration, redevelopment, not that many green field sites per se, but a lot of brown build, a lot of reconfiguration. And I'm just wondering, has the partnership in its time, or relatively recently, engaged with people who have an interest in outcomes and data, but also they may have some capacity to provide some income support to the partnership to allow us to expand what we're doing at no cost to our residents per se, but in partnership with us. Because I'm very mindful that our local plan in Kingston is up for adoption sooner rather than later, and then there will be a significant engagement dialogue. But waste is the sleeper. People tend to look at it at the end of the story of talking. I'd like to get them at the front through your chair, if we could maybe throw that to the officers as maybe an idea.
Yeah, I mean, the partnership has produced sort of a planning guidance document, which is meant to be a thing that developers can refer to in terms of what the expectations are around waste and recycling. So that does exist, but I think in terms of funding and getting sort of, I think, you know, one of the 5 priorities for the next 2 years is to attract some funding. So I certainly can add sort of major developers onto the list of people maybe to approach and speak to about helping us with some of our campaigns, particularly ones aimed at communal properties, for sure. I was also thinking, you know, like I say, we've been very successful over the last few years of working with industry associations and some people like We London to get funding, but I want to look broader than that. I want to look at some of the big commercial companies that we've got operating, particularly, you know, some of the big sort of consumer companies that produce a lot of the waste that we collect, you know, the packaging, etc. Maybe they will feel obliged to help out deal with it. So yeah, I'll certainly add developers to the list of people to target.
Okay, thank you very much. Does anyone else have any questions? Okay, so as chair and in line with the recommendations tabled within the report, I can confirm on behalf of the committee that the report is noted. Can I have that seconded, please? Agreed. And does the committee also agree to approve the 2-year South London Waste Partnership Communications Plan 23-24, 24-25 as illustrated in Appendix A, and approve to delegate authority to agree any required minor amendments discussed to the communications plan to the chair of the South London Waste Partnership Joint Committee and also the chair of the South London Waste Partnership Strategic Management? Agreed?
Agreed.
Anyone again? Very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so the last point was just a next date, or the next meeting date, isn't it? I believe we haven't got a date in the diary at the moment, we just have September, is that right?
We do, yes, we do. We will get dates in the diary as soon as possible. The committee at the moment meets 4 times a year, so that will be September, December, February, and June date. There'll be the 4 dates that will be held in Croydon.
I've been asked to suggest 20 September. I don't know if we can circulate that and come
Yeah.
back. But
Yeah, let's circulate that. Unless anyone wants to, at the moment, we'll put that forward then as a date that.
okay. All right.